Our oldest daughter, Annette, is with us, and we're going out and explore some of the sites out in Central Oregon. We're first going to try to find the Big Hole, which I have been to one time, and it was thought to have been a place where a meteorite hit the earth, but then later scientists found that it was just a sink from volcanic activity. Anyway, it's a pretty good sized hole. On one side of the highway is the Big Hole, and the other side is Hole in the Ground. It was during the early 1970s, the last time I was there, and it's grown up so much we couldn't even find it. There was a great big hole you could look in, but now we found nothing. But I think we circled it and did see sort of a valley there, but nothing like what it was in the 1970s. And so we thought we might go to a hole in the ground just across the road. And anyway, we got over to go in there and found the road was closed due to fire danger. We did see some totally wonderful ponderosa pines. They're great big, growing straight and tall out here in this pumice type soil. Unless we just missed it, I don't think we did. I think it's grown up with new growth trees so much we couldn't even see in it. So we're going to try for the Big Hole, but then we found that it was closed due to fire activity. So now we're going to go over and explore Fort Rock. It looks like we might be just going around the rim of this Big Hole, but I'm not certain. I'll have to try it again later and go to the one across Highway 97 later. We will join Highway 97 for just a short distance, then make the left-hand turn to go toward Fort Rock. There's a very definite change in the scenery as soon as we drop down in the valley floor. This area is lower elevation, and so the pine trees won't grow there. We travel only a short distance through the sagebrush country on the valley floor, and then we look off to the left, and there it is, the awesome Fort Rock. A testament written in stone about Oregon's volcanic origin. Fort Rock stands straight and tall out here as it has forever, and then there's a village. Only this village wasn't originally built here. They moved in a bunch of these old cabins and schoolhouse and a church, all from the surrounding desert areas. This was one time where homesteaders sweated and worked so hard to try to make it, and most of them didn't when it came.
The history of the West is linked with the idea of finding a new home in a challenging land. We call it homesteading. During the Pleistocene epoch, homesteaders in the Fort Rock Basin were mammals, camels, horses, flamingos, and ocean-going fish. They settled in a land of lush forest with a huge lake that covered hundreds of square miles. Approximately 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene, the lake began drying up and the forest receded. Animal homesteaders, dependent upon that disappearing environment, moved on or died, leaving behind their fossil remains. Around this time, a new species appeared on the landscape, Homo sapiens, the first Native Americans. These earliest people left behind petroglyphs, weapon points, sagebrush sandals, and the mystery of where they came from and why they left. During a long climatic transition period, many other peoples came and departed. It was around 500 years ago that the northern Paiute came to the Fort Rock Basin. Modern European homesteaders came to the high desert in 1905. People arrived in substantial numbers to cultivate and dry farm the desert. But there was a harsh lesson to be learned about depending on the vagary of nature. Drought and failed crops drove most of the new homesteaders away by 1920. They left behind the bleached remains of shattered homes and shattered dreams. These homesteaders all learned the lesson of millennia, that to challenge nature is an ever-changing and never-ending struggle.
Although the old village site is closed for this time of year, we can still look across the fence.
These are all old homesteads, houses that have been moved in here and fixed up a little bit. Otherwise they'd be done for. This must be an old well driller. Oh, and there's one of the residents. Kitty, kitty, kitty.
The 1909 Enlarged Homestead Act fueled a land rush that began with the Homestead Act of 1862. The act allowed qualified individuals to claim 320 acres by building a residence and cultivating 40 acres. Motivated by dreams of a Garden of Eden or simply desire to own land, thousands headed west. In 1911, Oregon's Silver Lake leader claimed, "Every stage and every automobile licensed to carry passengers brings its quota of new settlers who are hurrying to file on a piece of government land before it is too late. Central Oregon has never seen, and after next summer will never see another such rush, for by that time it will be virtually all gone." Although large livestock ranches were established in this region during the late 1800s, farming came with the homesteaders in the early 1900s. Life on this land was not easy for these pioneers, especially when the hot summer sun struck the anvil of the desert or the hoary blasts of winter froze their dreams. Dryland farming was a laborious and expensive venture, and many would-be sodbusters simply left when their backs gave out or the money ran out. The advent of World War I saw many homesteaders drafted into service, while others left for the good jobs in the city. The development of deep well irrigation technology in the 1960s made agricultural profitable. Today, locally grown alfalfa is highly prized and is shipped as far as Japan. Those homesteaders that persevered created their own Garden of Eden and tight-knit communities that endured.
Okay, and here's some more. I guess we got enough of that though. These old buildings were moved in, and apparently this old schoolhouse set out here on the desert someplace. The old schoolhouse has been moved in here, and the old store as well, complete with a gas pump.
So from the old village site, we'll take the short drive to Fort Rock. No trip to Fort Rock is complete without visiting the grave site of Rube Long. He was the one that gave Fort Rock to the state parks, and he was a very witty individual that coined several phrases that are still used today, and he was a co-author of the book named The Oregon Desert, which you can probably still get on Amazon.com or someplace like that. This definitely has the flavor of an old ranch cemetery setting in the shadow of Fort Rock.
Here there's one that was bitten by a rattlesnake.
Fort Rock was formed by a volcanic eruption many years ago.
It just says husband, Reuben A. Long. He was born in 1898 and he died in 1974.
Rube Long only lived to be 76, and I don't know where his wife is buried. She doesn't seem to be here. This must have been a logger. buried here. A few old wooden stones here.
No one ever said that life was easy for the early homesteaders, and here is a very sad chapter to this right in front of us. 2 girls that must have died at birth. I remember from my childhood days being raised on a ranch in Montana that people just plain didn't live as long then due to the harsh nature of the work and being out in all kinds of weather tending cattle. It just takes a toll on you and you die younger. There's always accidents happen working with livestock and horses that take a toll on them too. And so it's a life that they really love and wouldn't have anything else. From the cemetery, we'll go to the state park where they've recently built some nice restrooms, and we can get up close and personal to the big rock itself. There's even some little picnic shelters.
Fort Rock's jagged peaks rise sharply against the desert horizon. But not that long ago, this massive ring of stone was a volcanic island in a prehistoric lake. From lush to stark, during the last ice age, Fort Rock was surrounded by water. Before drying up around 10,000 years ago, the lake, with its associated wetlands and wildlife, was the foundation of life for prehistoric humans. If you were standing here, then you'd be hearing waves splashing, cottonwood leaves rustling, ducks quacking, and people talking on a distant shore. You might even be standing underwater.
I've been enjoying this place since the early 1970s, and my family were too. And this is my oldest daughter, Annette, sitting in the same place I had her picture, that I took her picture in about 1972 or 3 or someplace along there. But anyway, I didn't have time to look.
There's Annette in the same rock where she sat in about 1972, and I took her picture. I don't know whether I can find it or not, but it's the same place.
Wait.
This was a good place for all sorts of birds and animals to call home, all those little pits up above, and even on this rock.
We will go down to a picnic table just in the shadow of Fort Rock and have our lunch. After lunch, we drive around where we can look in the center of this big horseshoe-shaped rock formation where I used to take my kids for hikes years ago. Then, around the opposite side of it, where again you can see all kinds of little pockets, and this is due to the way the molten lava cooled. We cannot go up to it anymore, but we can look at it across the fence and see Cow Cave.
Cow Cave, where the first evidence of man being here were found by Dr. Cressman. And anyway, at that time, it was thought man hadn't been here near that long, but he kind of turned the world of archaeology upside down with that theory, and now they've upped that we've been here like 20,000 years. But when there was still water in this lake where we're sitting at that time, and anyway, there were, in the lower levels, he found duck bones and fish bones, and stuff associated with hunting on the water. And then later on the upper areas of it, after the water receded, they found like things like mammoth and camel and tiny horse bones. As the water receded, then they started hunting land mammals. And this stuff was all donated to the parks by Rue Blanc, who we saw up in the cemetery, and his wife. And there's Fort Rock from this direction. It's kind of a very neat rock formation.
This is all for now, and thanks for watching.